I feel like we spend uh, basically our entire lives just obsessed with climbing, like
Right.
climbing the corporate ladder, climbing social ranks,
Oh, absolutely.
fighting tooth and nail for that corner office. The title, the power, the possessions. It's exhausting.
It really is. We are so deeply conditioned by our culture to just, well, define success exclusively by upward mobility.
Right. And imagine spending your whole life exhausting yourself to get to the very top of that ladder, only to look around and realize it's been leaning against the completely wrong wall.
Yeah, that is a terrifying realization. But honestly, it happens every single day. We're taught that if you aren't visible, if you aren't, elevated above the crowd, you're somehow failing.
Which is exactly why today's deep dive is going to be honestly pretty disruptive. We are taking this whole concept of greatness and just completely redefining it.
I'm really looking forward to this one. It's such a radical shift.
Yeah. Same. And to do this, we are anchoring our discussion in a really powerful primary source. It's a sermon from the Church of 1122, specifically from their Religion to Redemption series.
Right, the one focusing on Matthew chapter 20.
Exactly. But we aren't just staying in the sermon. To really unpack the mechanics of what's going on here, we've brought in a whole stack of supplemental sources.
Yeah, we're pulling in historical analyses of early church debates, some heavy theological deep dives into the famous Christ hymn of Philippians chapter 2.
And we are going to get into some really fascinating linguistic breakdowns of the original Greek texts, too.
It's a brilliant synthesis of sources, it really is.
Yeah.
And the mission here is to basically uncover how the kingdom of God entirely inverts our cultural obsession with power.
Yes, flipping it completely upside down.
Exactly. Moving us away from that exhausting performative treadmill of religion where you're constantly trying to earn your status and stepping into the actual transformative reality of redemption.
And the disconnect between what we think is great and what this text claims is great is just massive. I mean, you see it immediately in our primary source.
You really do. In Matthew 20, Jesus gathers his disciples together for what is essentially a really grim strategic briefing.
Right. He lays the gospel out with crystal clarity. He basically tells them, look, we are going to Jerusalem. I am going to be betrayed, arrested, mocked, crucified, and on the third day, resurrected.
He is offering them a one-way ticket to a sacrificial death.
Yeah.
There's no room for ambiguity about what kind of mission this is.
It's the ultimate heavy, serious moment. And what happens next is just baffling to me.
Oh, it's wild.
Immediately after this profound prediction of his own death, the mother of James and John, the sons of Zebedee, she pulls Jesus aside.
Right in the middle of this tense moment.
And she asks him if her two boys can have the top seats of power in his kingdom, one on his right, one on his left.
It's just incredible timing.
I mean, read the room. It's like sitting in a meeting where someone clearly isn't listening to understand. They're just, waiting for their turn to speak so they can pitch their own agenda.
That's a perfect analogy.
Right.
Because Jesus is focused on a cross, and this family is trying to negotiate for corner offices.
Right. But to really understand this, we have to look at the cultural context, don't we?
Yeah, we have to look at the political context of what she's actually asking for. In ancient royal courts, the seats on the right and left of the king, those weren't just like VIP seating at a banquet.
Oh, they were actual positions of authority.
Exactly. Those were the seats of the co-regents. Or, in a military context, those were the generals who protected the king's right and left flanks in battle.
Oh, wow. So she's essentially asking for her sons to be the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense in this new administration.
Precisely. So it's not just a proud mom wanting her kids to be recognized. This is a highly calculated political power play right in the middle of a discussion about execution.
That is just a massive clash of expectations.
It really is. The religious and political people of that day, they fully expected a Messiah who would arrive and just aggressively flex his power.
Right, they wanted a conquering geopolitical king.
Exactly, someone who would crush the Roman occupation and establish an earthly empire. To them, greatness meant domination. They literally couldn't process the idea of a suffering servant.
Which perfectly sets up the core argument of the 1122 sermon. Because the disciples fundamentally misunderstood the mission, they completely misunderstood the mechanics of greatness.
Yes, and the sermon points out that in our world, greatness is usually measured by production, right?
Yeah.
Like what you can build, what you can earn.
You can influence, yeah.
But in this inverted kingdom, greatness doesn't start with production at all. It starts with proximity. Proximity to Jesus.
That is such a crucial pivot point, and the text really challenges you, the listener, to examine where your allegiance actually lies.
It asks a really invasive question. Is God actually preeminent in your life?
Right. Does he get the first of your time, your resources, your affections, or is he just like a consultant you bring in when your own kingdom building hits a snag?
I love that phrase, treating God like a consultant. And the sermon uses a brilliant illustration for this going all the way back to Genesis.
Oh, the Sabbath principle.
Yes, it looks at the Sabbath principle through the lens of Adam. So Adam was created on the sixth day, which means his very first full day of existence on earth.
Ooh, the seventh day.
Right, the seventh day was the Sabbath. He spent his first day resting.
Okay, but I have to stop you there because logically that makes absolutely no sense.
How so?
Why in the world would Adam need a rest day when he literally hadn't done a single day of work yet? The guy was, what, 6 hours old? He hasn't even broken a sweat.
I know. But that is the exact tension the text wants you to feel. The expert consensus here, which the sermon extracts beautifully, is that in this framework, you don't rest from work.
You rest for work.
Yes, you rest for work.
Yeah.
In our modern framework, Sabbath or rest is viewed purely as recovery. You exhaust yourself producing, and then you crash.
So you're saying the theological design here is entirely different?
Completely different. God established the Sabbath as the starting line, not the finish line. It demonstrates that if the Creator isn't preeminent, if stopping to acknowledge Him isn't the starting point, your whole life is going to be out of order.
Oh, that makes so much sense. Because if you start with yourself, you're just on a performative treadmill.
Exactly. You are endlessly trying to produce an identity to prove your worth. But if you start from a posture of worship, the pressure's off.
Right, you already have proximity, so you don't need to produce to earn your spot. And when your life is out of order, like you said, you end up making terrible decisions.
Precisely. And this connects deeply to our supplemental sources on the Apostle Paul's letter to the Galatians, specifically chapter 1.
Where Paul fiercely insists that the gospel is of divine origin, not human.
Yes. He warns against what scholars call the me gospel, or the prosperity gospel. Those are distortions specifically designed to seek human approval and elevate the self.
Right, because true greatness means pleasing an audience of one.
Exactly. If you are constantly trying to win the approval of men, you cannot be a servant of Christ.
So it all starts with this internal shift, right? Bending the knee, prioritizing proximity over production. But an internal shift eventually has to collide with the external world.
Oh, definitely. And the 11:22 sermon makes it very clear that when this kingdom mentality meets the real world, the result is friction.
It's pain. And Jesus addresses this immediately when the mother asks for the thrones. He looks at the brothers, James and John, and asks them, "Are you able to drink the cup that I am to drink?"
And he's definitely not talking about a victory toast there.
No, not at all. He's talking about the cup of suffering. The sermon argues that to be great, you must be willing to endure pain.
It's a non-negotiable prerequisite in this framework.
But let's, play devil's advocate here for a second. In our culture, specifically in the corporate world, greatness and authority usually mean you get to insulate yourself from pain.
Right, you get the executive assistant to handle the difficult calls.
Yeah, you get the corner office to get away from the noise. You delegate the friction. So why does kingdom greatness require absorbing pain?
Because authority in the kingdom isn't given for self-preservation. It is given for the specific purpose of bearing the burdens of others.
Oh, wow. So if you insulate yourself from pain, you insulate yourself from the people you are actually supposed to be serving.
Exactly. In a fallen, broken world, authentic service always creates friction. It costs you time, it costs you emotional energy, it costs your pride.
And if you aren't willing to drink that cup of suffering,
Then you simply cannot be trusted with authority. Because you will inevitably use that authority to protect yourself instead of protecting the vulnerable.
that is a total paradigm shift. You cannot be trusted with authority until you have willingly submitted to the friction of serving.
Which requires a staggering amount of humility.
Yeah, and this is where our supplemental sources bring in what is arguably the most complex, beautiful piece of theology in the entire New Testament.
The Christ hymn in Philippians chapter 2.
Yes, it really is the pinnacle illustration of this concept.
Paul writes this poetic hymn describing how the pre-existent Christ, who was in the very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage.
The Greek word there is fascinating. I've got it right here in my notes. It's harpagmos.
Yes, harpagmos. It literally means a thing to be seized, clung to, or exploited for personal gain.
So Christ possessed absolute equality with God, the ultimate authority and status, but he resolved not to weaponize it for his own comfort.
Exactly. Instead, the text says he emptied himself.
Okay, here is where it gets highly technical, and honestly where a lot of people get tripped up.
It is definitely a deep theological pool.
When the text says Jesus emptied himself, and the Greek word is kinash, what exactly did he empty out? Like, did he lose his divinity?
That is the million-dollar theological question.
Because if he actually stopped being God so he could become a human servant, if he subtracted his godness, that changes the entire foundation of the faith.
It really does, and it has sparked massive debates throughout church history. This concept is known as the kenosis theory, stemming directly from that word, Canuck.
Right, and if we look at our historical sources, you see German theologians in the 19th century arguing about this, right?
Yeah, they argued that the divine logos actually limited itself or gave up fundamental divine attributes like omniscience or omnipresence to become human.
But the early church didn't see it that way at all. What did the Council of Nicaea say about this?
Right. Orthodox theology, which was codified at the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, pushes back on that idea entirely. They established a crucial term, homousios.
Which means of one substance, right?
Correct. The Orthodox view is that Jesus absolutely retained his divine nature. The Greek word used in Philippians is morphe, meaning the essential, unchangeable nature of a thing.
But he voluntarily divested himself of the privileges, right? The glory, the prestige of that nature.
Exactly, to take on the likeness or homoioma of a slave. He was fully God and fully human.
I read an analogy for this once that really helped it click for me. It's like a king who is watching his soldiers get slaughtered in the mud.
Oh, that's a good one.
Instead of staying safely on his throne, he takes off his royal robes, he takes off his crown, and he puts on the armor of a foot soldier and wades into the mud with them.
Right, and by taking off the crown, he didn't stop being the king.
Exactly. He possesses the exact same royal nature in the mud as he did on the throne. He just temporarily laid aside the privileges of the throne to suffer alongside his people.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it.
Yeah.
He didn't subtract his deity, he added humanity.
And all the vulnerability, hunger, exhaustion, and suffering that comes with it.
Yes, he emptied himself by taking on the form of a servant.
And our sources mention this ties into a modern theological debate called eternal functional subordination, or EFS.
Oh boy, yeah, the EFS debate.
Can you explain that in plain English without making it sound like a seminary textbook? Like, what are the actual stakes of that debate?
Absolutely. So, the EFS debate centers on the relationship between God the Father and Jesus the Son. Some modern scholars argue that Jesus is eternally, ontologically subordinate to the Father.
Wait, let me stop you there. What does ontologically actually mean in this context?
Right, sorry. Ontological refers to the very core level of being or existence.
Okay.
So, saying Jesus is ontologically subordinate means he is, by his very nature, eternally beneath the Father in authority, forever and always.
Got it. So some say he's always been subordinate, but other scholars push back on that pretty hard, don't they?
Strongly. And this ties directly back to the kenosis of Philippians 2.
How so?
The counterargument is that if Jesus was already eternally subordinate by nature, then what did he actually empty himself of?
Oh, wow. That makes sense.
Right. Why did it require this massive universe-altering event to become a servant if he was already eternally playing a subordinate role?
The text of Philippians implies a massive voluntary shift in status, a true equal willingly choosing to step down.
Exactly. He steps off the throne to wash dirty feet.
And that mind-bending theological reality, it has to become a boots-on-the-ground reality for you, the listener. We can't just marvel at the theology. We have to actually emulate it.
Which brings us back to the 1122 sermon and the practical application of this. Serving others without strings attached.
This is where it gets incredibly uncomfortable for our modern sensibilities, honestly.
It really does, because in our world, we just love the phrase servant leader.
Oh, we put it on our LinkedIn profiles, our corporate mission statements.
But often it's just a tactic. We serve with strings attached.
Yeah, we carry the coffee so that people will notice how humble we are. Secretly expecting special treatment later.
Exactly. But the sermon emphasizes that true kingdom service has zero leverage. No manipulation, no guilt trips, no PR campaigns.
And the sermon highlights this with a fantastic anecdote about Charles Martin, the best-selling author.
Oh, that story is so compelling.
It is, and what makes it so compelling isn't just that he helped out at church, it's that he had every cultural reason to expect a microphone, a stage, or, a seat on the board.
Right, he's massive cultural capital.
But he came to the leadership and genuinely offered to do whatever grunt work they needed. He was literally willing to carry floor mats.
He completely abandoned his leverage to just be a servant.
And this perfectly mirrors the narrative juxtaposition that happens right there in Matthew chapter 20. The literary structure of this chapter is honestly brilliant.
It really is. Right after we see James and John's mother trying to leverage her relationship with Jesus to secure massive political power.
Right after all that ambitious posturing.
Exactly. Jesus is walking down the road and encounters two blind men.
It's the ultimate contrast. The disciples are trying to deal-make for thrones, but these two marginalized men sitting in the dirt, they just cry out for mercy.
They don't posture. They don't try to negotiate. They don't say, hey, Jesus, if you heal us, we will become your most loyal followers and help build your brand.
Right. They have zero cultural capital, zero leverage, and they know it. They just come with empty hands and ask for pity.
And Jesus stops. He doesn't rebuke them for interrupting his journey to Jerusalem. He heals them.
Because they intuitively understood the kingdom dynamic that the inner circle had completely missed.
Which brings us to the theological climax of Matthew 20, verse 28. Jesus explains his entire mission statement. He says, the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many.
Let's dig into that word ransom, because we hear that in church a lot, but I feel like we lose the gritty reality of what it actually meant in the first century.
Oh, absolutely.
Our sources do a deep dive on the Greek word used here, which is anti, and that means in the stead of or in exchange for.
Yes, this is substitutionary atonement. And to understand how radical this was, you really have to understand how ransom worked in the Roman Empire.
It wasn't just a hostage negotiation, right?
No, it was tied directly to the slave market.
Oh.
If a slave was going to be freed, a manumission price had to be paid. Often, this transaction happened at a pagan temple, where the money was paid to the deity, and the deity effectively bought the slave, rendering them free from their human master.
Wow. So Jesus is using highly charged, visceral economic language here.
Very much so.
He is saying humanity is enslaved to sin and death, sitting on the auction block, and he is paying the manumission price. And the currency isn't gold, it's his own life.
He is stepping onto the auction block instead of us. He absorbs the debt completely.
And our supplemental sources connect this directly to the ancient prophecies of Isaiah 53, right? The image of the suffering servant.
They do, but they point out a crucial distinction that we often miss in our modern Western way of thinking.
The hyper-individualism.
Exactly. In the West, we tend to hyper-individualize the atonement. We say, Jesus died for me personally to save my soul.
And while that is true, the text in Isaiah and Matthew has a much broader collective scope.
It's a we mentality, not just an I mentality.
Right. The Greek text says he gave his life as a ransom for many.
He poured out his life to purchase an entire kingdom, a collective body of believers. We aren't just saved as isolated individuals to go live our own private spiritual lives.
We're saved into a community.
Yes, and the logic follows. If the king gave his life to serve the we, then we are inherently obligated to serve the we.
You cannot accept the ransom and then refuse to carry the floor mats for the people standing next to you in the kingdom.
No, you can't.
So if we pull all these threads together, the picture is incredibly stark. We've taken the world's definition of greatness, amassing power, seeking position, insulating yourself from pain, climbing over others, and we have watched the text completely obliterate it.
It really does.
True greatness in this framework isn't found in what you accumulate. It's found in your proximity to a God who demands to be first.
It's found in your willingness to endure the friction and pain of serving others.
And it's found in the staggering humility of laying down your rights, modeled perfectly by a king who stripped off his armor to die in the mud for his people. And it's found in serving those around you without a single string attached.
It is an entirely upside-down kingdom.
It really is. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what is the final thought for the person listening right now? How do they walk away with this?
I want to leave the listener with a provocation drawn directly from the end of the Christ hymn in Philippians chapter 2, cross-referenced with the book of Revelation, chapter 20.
What is it, sir?
The text argues that because of Christ's ultimate humility, because he went all the way down to the basement of human suffering, God exalted him to the highest place.
Right.
And it says that in the name of Jesus, every knee will bow, in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord.
Every knee, that's absolute universal authority, no exceptions.
No exceptions. The text paints a picture of the end of the age where ultimate authority is undeniably revealed. But here's the reality the sources challenge the listener to consider.
Yeah.
There are two ways that knee bends. Some will bow their knees with ready, joyful thankfulness, because they made the conscious choice to bend the knee in humility today.
And the others.
Others will eventually bow only by force, overwhelmed by the undeniable reality of his holy righteousness, when it is simply too late to choose.
Man, that is a heavy, sobering thought to leave on. We all have a choice in front of us. We can voluntarily bend the knee, set aside our ambition, and step into this inverted kingdom today.
Or we can spend our lives building our own little empires, only to be forced to recognize that ultimate authority tomorrow.
It really forces you to ask, which wall is your ladder leaning against? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this exploration challenges you to examine your own definitions of success and to carry a radically different vision of greatness into your week. Keep questioning, keep digging, and we will see you next time.